we're going to talk Loki now. Let us know what you thought of the series in general, because it's over. And I suppose as it's freshest in our heads, let's get straight to the finale. We'll maybe go backwards as well at some point in the next however long it might be. Was it the finale you hoped for? And also, how do you think it impacts the MCU going forward? Who shall we start with here?
All right, set your clocks, folks. We're gonna do.
Let's give the first half an hour to
our absolute greatest effort. Will go into brevity today. I promise.
Because I haven't eaten. I think
I speak for Charlie and myself, because we always text each other in the wee hours, at least for me, about these shows. I gotta say, this was almost everything I expected in terms of the content. Like, the surprise was something that we discussed, but the execution, A, making it a cliffhanger, B, introducing this major villain without introducing him, is one of the most clever introductions of someone ever, because you give us the actor, you give us the backstory, you show us a performance, maybe not the performance, and you have this villain say, oh, no, I'm the way better version. Now you're doomed. That is, I think, a great way to set up stakes. So it was it played more like a play than any of the other episodes. It was mostly in his office, and it was understated, and I loved it.
And what about in terms of how it opens things up moving forward? Well, I mean, there's going to be a season 2, but I mean, generally with the MCU, what kind of impact do you think this series is going to have on it?
Everything is opened up here. This is what I find so inspiring and really fun about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that they, as a company, they had to basically deal with what they had. In the 90s, Marvel Studios gave out most of their characters to other companies, the most popular ones. So that's why the Fantastic Four, X-Men were sent to Fox. It's why Sony owned Spider-Man. It's why I think Universal owned the Hulk.
Universal owns the Hulk, yeah. Both, Hulk and Namor.
Yeah. And like, those characters were the most popular ones, therefore they will go off and get their movies made. And you look back and you think, oh, Marvel Studios, how are we going to make an Iron Man movie? How are we going to make this Captain America movie work? And if you look at it now, you'd think it's ridiculous, but back then, that was the sandbox they had. Now they've sort of kicked the sandbox a little bit, and somehow they've duplicated 50 million sandboxes. They can play with anything they want to. They can do anything they want. Casting is no longer an issue, because you could potentially delve into variants. You could recast the character and it could still be someone else telling those stories. You don't necessarily have to rely on character deaths to be an issue. You could have characters come back in different ways and formats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the Spider-Man film that's coming out soon is supposedly supposed to tie into some of the classic films that we grew up with, namely the Raimi trilogy, and also the Amazing Spider-Man films. So potentially those now somehow recanonized in some ways. I joke with Alden a lot, because one of his favorite films is the 2003 Daredevil movie for some reason.
For some reason.
He's the only one.
There's many reasons, I'm sure. Many valid reasons in Alden's mind.
That is something that is now on the table. It's like, we're expecting Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock to show up, but what if Ben Affleck as Matt Murdock shows up and he's like, oh, I'm a variant of your Matt Murdock? That type of stuff's on the table. If in 10 years Robert Downey Jr. is like, you know what, I kind of feel like I got one more in me, you could preserve the Tony Stark death, never cheapen that, and have him be an alternate future gray-haired old man Stark type. Like, you could do anything at this point. You essentially made it so that any casting choices that we know almost happened, that could be fun. Like, show us the John Krasinski Captain America, and things like that. It's changed the game.
Is this the Loki we're going to have moving forward now, do you think?
I mean, I think it's interesting, right? And I again, like I feel like Charlie and I are sort of in lockstep on some of these things. So when I talk, just imagine that he is also talking, and vice versa. It's interesting because the challenge with this show, right, was you take a character that had all of their core growth leading up to being murdered by Thanos. And so that's the events of Dark World, that's the events of Ragnarok. And it's a lot to, to take away. But what they did is that they had this version confront all of that in the form of actual footage. And what that enabled them to do was chip away at all the facade that those journeys chipped away at in the movies. So him seeing like, oh, my inner good came out, just made his inner good come out. You're not that guy because we've shown you that you prove that you're not that guy. So it's almost like we got to the same point Z, but took a completely different path. And with the introduction, of course, of Sylvie, of classic Loki, would be remiss if I didn't mention Alligator Loki, Boastful Loki, President Loki. All of these characters just highlighted and underlined a different facet. So I think that in season 2, it's going to be interesting to see sort of how much further into the heroism he goes. Because Loki Prime, Loki proper, sacred timeline Loki, he died a hero, but he didn't really get to live a hero. This Loki seems like he's going to actually get to suit up and do hero stuff for a bit.
Yeah, to jump in, I on the show I do called Ponder Vision, we talked a lot about this in the recent episode where the sort of the main timeline Loki that dies in Infinity War, he's kind of like Darth Vader, where he redeems himself, but he doesn't really get to live out that redemption arc. He doesn't get to go further. He doesn't get to fully heal himself. He does save Asgard in the last moments of Ragnarok, and then the next scene that happens in his timeline would be when Thanos invades. So he doesn't really get that chance. This is like if you had Darth Vader die in Return of the Jedi, and then Vader at some point between episode 3 and 4 gets plucked out of the timeline and gets a chance of becoming Anakin Skywalker again. That's the sort of weird way I would phrase it, where this Loki gets to absorb and watch what he went through, but also he gets stuff that he never really had. And I don't think the other Loki ever really had truly, which is, I guess Loki's characterization is that he's always wanted to feel loved, and he wanted to know that he's loved and confirmation of that. And I don't think his family could give that to him all the time. Even his mum, who's one of the key role models in his life, lied to him as a child throughout his life about his parentage.
Which, it should be noted, is a very long childhood. Like, we forget
very long.
It's like 1,500 years, I think, that Thor is in Infinity War. So
that's a casual childhood, isn't it?
So yeah, like he has those moments where he does get to see the fact that his father loved him, his mother loved him, his brother loved him, and he can actually believe those truths. It isn't that he doesn't have to like worry if they're lying or they want something out of him, because he sees that for what it is. And then he gets other people like Mobius who just straight up tells him the truth and is earnest with him. And that earnesty, I feel like, has done a lot to help change his attitude.
It's so true. I think about like episode 1 where he's like, I know you're smart. And Loki's like, okay. Yeah. Like he's not used to somebody being upfront and complimentary.
He's so confused about someone being honest and earnest. Like he's not, Mobius has no restrictions there. He straight up tells him, look, could be using you. Like I am using you. But also you can be good. You can do better than this. And I know that's true. And he proves it. And that's what I think is really interesting about this whole series.
And what I love what you said there. Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
No, go for it, Alden.
I was just going to say that in that lineup, I didn't think of it in this way, but Charlie, you nailed it, is that the footage is, of course, in order of the movies. So it's, Frigga, you're my son, I love you, etc. She dies. Then it's Odin, I love you, my son. He dies. Then it's Thor, I thought the world of you. Loki, when they're in the elevator in Ragnarok. So he gets all those confirmations. What's the last one he doesn't really get? Do you love yourself? And then that becomes the 6 episodes, because he's moved to tears by their love, but it's always that last breakthrough. And then Michael Waldron, the showrunner, had that idea that set the internet on fire. What would a character like this need to get to that point? Literal self-love. You literally should love yourself. And the two of them are just dynamite. I mean, I know she's a more of a British television actress. I had not ever seen Sophia DiMartino before, but now I just want her in everything.
Yeah, now you're going to see a lot more of her, I think. Yeah, no, I'm on board with that, and I did enjoy the character journey that we went on with Loki. Something I'm not enjoying so much, though, and you mentioned this earlier, Alden, and I wasn't going to bring it up because, you know, it's a little bit awkward. I was hoping that your, both of you I'm talking to here, your alligator variants were going to turn up for the stream tonight. I wasn't really expecting this.
I know. It's horribly disappointing. He's bitey and he's cranky.
Let's bring in some thoughts from the chat about Loki. Philip Hawkins says, I really like Loki. It's my favorite of the Disney Plus shows so far. It's a quirky uniqueness, much like WandaVision, but it landed the ending a lot better than WandaVision for Phil. And also Brad Snoke, who can't be with us tonight, dropped a note in the Discord and said, Brad Snoke loves Loki. The best MCU series yet, in my opinion. The finale was a little bit of a drag, to be honest, but still 9 out of 10. And I know Brad comes into these series in a kind of similar place to me, a little bit more casual when it comes to Marvel, but I know Brad has been enjoying everything so far on Disney Plus. Everything, I mean, Falcon Winter Soldier did feel a little bit more like your kind of maybe your standard sort of Marvel movie release, Avengers release. But WandaVision and Loki have been so fresh and so unique and quirky as Phil said. I partly because I knew I'd be catching up on this series, I wouldn't be able to watch it, on a weekly basis. I avoided a lot coming into it, and I did with WandaVision too. I avoided a lot of the trailers and early reviews and what have you, even spoiler-free reviews. So I had no kind of expectations of coming into Loki. So you guys, I know you lap up a lot more of it going into it. Did you have expectations for this series coming into it, and how close was it to meeting them?
Yeah, I definitely did, because Michael Waldron has worked on Rick and Morty, which, is a fantastic show. Delves a lot into the science fiction and bizarre genres. So I was really hoping for a really weird, quirky show. The trailers did a lot to amp my hype up. But I think that really, really got my attention was the fact that Michael Waldron, the writer, was pulled off. When the project was finished, he was then given the reins to write Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which to me was a big sort of sign of perhaps maybe this is going to be one to look forward to and one to really get excited about. So as soon as that trailer dropped and we saw those elements, I was completely sold. I love the aesthetics of the whole thing, the music, everything was just, very hyped for this one.
Yeah, I was in a similar place too, where I knew that it needed to be, I mean, we use weird as a blanket term. It needed to be weird in very specific ways, because I did have those worries. Thor and the entire Asgard corner of Marvel is my favorite corner of Marvel. Thor is my favorite comic book character. And so like those books mean a lot to me. And I loved the movie versions. And I thought Loki's death was tragic, but solid. I thought that, him dying, trying to stop Thanos was good. And I thought, oh man, like you're going to pull him out of time. Even watching Endgame, I think it was the second time I watched it that I watched it with a more critical eye and thought, is that the back door for the TV show? And then we got quickly confirmation after that it would be that. So I was worried, but that first trailer just immediately set the tone. It was more sci-fi than I thought it would be, because the Thor stuff is usually straddles that sci-fi fantasy sort of space opera line. And this one obviously went full tilt into retro future. It went full tilt into some would say Whovian, at least to a certain degree. I know that Charlie's gonna temper that comparison.
No, I wondered about that because episode 3, there was a lot of people comparing episode 3 to like a mega budget episode of Doctor Who, which is a little bit mean about modern day Doctor Who.
It's driving
Charlie,
me crazy, Jamie.
You're a Doctor Who fan. What's on your chest right now?
He's been very touchy.
Come on, get it off your chest, Charlie.
I just feel
and Alden started this.
I just feel like a lot of the people saying it. Oh, yeah, this is Doctor Who. This is better than Doctor Who. This is better than modern day Doctor Who. I'm like, well, first of all, I feel like you calm down. Like, yes, there's a lot of influences in the show, and yes, there's Doctor Who's formula in there, and there's the DNA of certain bits, but I don't think it's completely like Doctor Who. Like, people saying this is exactly like Doctor Who. I'm like, I don't think you've watched Doctor Who. Like, yes, there's the time travel and the weird quirky elements. Like when people are saying stuff like, "Oh, they went to Pompeii," see, I'm like, yeah, it's a famous.
Well, Doctor
event.
Who, Stephen Moffat invented Pompeii. I don't know if you knew that.
Exclusive rights to it as well.
Yeah, so like for me personally, I felt like there's a lot more influences in the show than just Doctor Who. Not to say that it isn't like Doctor Who. But there's so many in it. The show feels much more Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to me. Like surviving all this weird stuff, the quirky stuff going on, just getting absorbed by all of it.
You're not going to like David Milano's comment.
Look, I think it's a fair comment to have. It's when people like making videos and stuff saying it's better than modern day Doctor Who. I'm like, all right, chillax a little bit. I think
that it's like, first of all, I do want to make a self-correction. I said Moffat. I should have said Russell T. It is a Russell T episode. Don't yell at me in the comments. But I
wasn't going to bring it up, but
I know you would have texted me later. But the whole comparison I get, because it's sort of like
thank you, Philip. Sorry.
If anybody, yeah, exactly. I was about to say, like, if somebody pulls out a laser sword in something, what do you immediately think of? It's that type of situation. There's two people. They happen to be a man and a woman walking around on a planet that is imminent disaster, and there's a lot of the trappings, which I understand as broad strokes. People would jump to that, but it's a blending of the flavor. I saw Doctor Who in there. I saw Hitchhiker in there. I saw Firefly in there, especially in that episode. I mean, there's a literal train job set up and poor people being left out on there. So you can make the argument for Firefly and Star Trek, and so I think it was a little bit of everything. But the key difference is that our heroes in Loki and Sylvie are nothing like the Doctor. And so they're just not similar characters outside of being long-lived. That said, do I think that it would be cool to see, Doctor Who with this level of money? Sure. But like, that's not something that I'm going to hold against Doctor Who. They're not trying to be the same thing.
That's antithetical to everything that's Doctor Who. If there's no tinfoil,
what have you started, Alden?
Then what are we doing here?
But you've got Phil. You've got Phil. Phil's got your back. Phil does a lot of Doctor Who content on YouTube. Philip Hawkins, and he's on your back. I'm self-confessed not a Doctor Who fan. So I, apart from the fact there's time travel, that's the only kind of connection I made with it. But I, as Alden mentioned, Hitchhikers as well. I can certainly see that little element of a vibe in there as well, amongst other elements too.
Also, Marvel Comics, like,
yeah, that's a big one.
It's a super time. I mean, what this show and the idea of variance and everything that it unlocks by the end with Sylvie killing He Who Remains, it's pushed it. Because people always say the MCU, what Kevin Feige did was make comic books on screen. And that's been largely a fair thing to say. It's never been more true than right now. Because comic book readers are used to, if they were reading the Jamie Stangroom comic book, they'd say, oh, Jamie looks completely different this week. Because a different artist started drawing the book. Now we have literally taken that phenomenon and thrown it on screen. Where it's like, maybe one day Tom Hiddleston doesn't want to play Loki anymore. Oh, well, we'll go over here. And this time it's, it's the next up and coming English actor that is going to take over the role or whatever.
Yeah, Loki could be the new Bond. Well, I wonder what the odds. Wonder what the odds are on that. You know, I think everyone's pretty much been linked with Bond, you know, as the new Bond. So why not throw Loki into the mix? Hiddleston must have been linked at one point, surely. Who hasn't?
Yeah, Hiddleston, I think,
Yeah.
was in the last crop of rumors for a
The
little
Night
bit there.
Manager, right?
With your comic book hats on, how did this series land with you guys?
Well, it's sort of one of their signatures at this point. It's something that Charlie and I talked about again a lot in text conversations, which we should just publish one day as a book and get canceled.
No, we should not.
But there's but Marvel has always done a little bit of, we're going to take it and we're not going to throw it out, but we're going to remix it. So, you know, we've had some things that are very faithful, like the first Brana Thor is very faithful in terms of the way it's presented, the way that they all act. Now, where so many Thor and Loki installments in, this Loki is an original storyline. To my knowledge, there hasn't been a Loki and Mobius. And Mobius is a comic book character, but he's vastly different. There hasn't been a Loki, Mobius, Ravonna, Kang thing, to my knowledge. So it's an original story, but with flavors of one book, flavors of another book, taking a couple characters, merging them. So that they've always done a little bit of picking and choosing to create their own thing. And what I loved about Richard E. Grant's classic Loki is that it almost felt like a nod to say to purists, somewhere out there in the multiverse is the pure, exactly as it happened in the book, looks exactly like this. Captain America with the wings, probably. Like, it's out there somewhere is what I interpreted that as.
Yeah, like I think we mentioned this before on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The MCU very early on, and for the majority, and still certain bits, they took a lot, not just from the Marvel comic books, but also there's the Ultimate Universe, which was the initiative that happened in the early noughts, where they made a whole different universe and restarted some of the core characters. So you had Ultimate Spider-Man, which was if Peter Parker was bitten by the spider, but it was 2001. And it was like all modern day stuff, and it was different. The characters were different. They reacted differently. It was more to do with, I guess, like, you know, the war on terror, and also those elements of the fears we have nowadays, which is more like genetic mutations and stuff, rather than in the 60s. I don't know if you noticed, a lot of the characters have to do with radiation, because, funnily enough, in the 60s, people were worried about nuclear bombs. So you have a lot of those elements there. And a lot of the MCU takes from the Ultimate Universe, so more realistic versions of the characters. So Captain America's outfit felt very much like the Ultimates. More realistic. I think Hawkeye's outfit is like straight from the Ultimates, from the first Avengers. Yeah. Rather than in the classic Marvel comics, he has the completely purple suit. Scarlet Witch, well, like just a jacket. But now we're seeing them going a bit more, like, we don't really have to worry about people worrying if this is too ridiculous and stuff. We can delve into the main Marvel comics. So you see Scarlet Witch is now this full-on crown and the classic costume. We see Vision. I mean, when Vision was introduced, that was one of the first steps to them going, like, this is a bit more stranger, a bit more weird. And now we've just got all this crazy stuff. We've had an alligator Loki. They introduced Frog in this series, the fourth Frog, which they got Chris Hemsworth to do ADR for, which I think is hilarious.
I saw that, yeah. It's great.
Yeah, so I feel like I love how they're sort of delving a bit more into it. And like Alden said, it's always about picking and choosing the best elements. Because let's be honest, the Marvel Universe has been around for, 70 plus years? Not everything they've done has been amazing in the comics. There's been mistakes. In the comics, Hank Pym hits his wife. They're not going to put that in the Marvel movie. I don't want to see Michael Douglas hit Michelle Pfeiffer, you know?
But you know what's clever, though? What Marvel's really good at is that they can even lean into negative things like that, put a spin on it, and make it palatable. Because in that first Ant-Man, they knew that Hank Pym has that infamous issue where he does straight up backhand Janet. So they show him being violent, and they show him being unhinged, and they show him with the "don't talk about my wife," and like, so they put enough of those shades of like, this guy's not that great a person in there,
rather than that abuse.
Exactly, without leaning all the way into those things. So they've, with Loki being confirmed in this series as bisexual, it's a nod and a lean into some of the Norse myth stuff that they probably could never depict without getting an R, with his various horse and wolf children and all that.
Everyone in the chat, get your scores out of 10 in for Loki season 1, and I'll be coming over to them in a minute. But something that has inspired me to ask this question to Charlie and Alden. I have seen a few comments in the chat from the Blue Pig Gaming and also Philip Hawkins referring to jet skis. So my question is... what are you hoping to see? What questions would you like to be answered in season 2? The obvious is, will Mobius get his jet ski? But what else?
Do you have any immediate predictions there, Charlie?
I mean, can we talk?
It doesn't have to be predictions so much. It can be more aspirations for,
or just
selfish here.
Wants.
We're talking straight up spoilers and stuff, right?
What, do you know stuff?
Well, no, but there's a character in the finale who...
Yeah, I already said his title, but we didn't really talk about where he'd be popping up next.
I mean, I think I don't know if I said spoilers at the start, but we've definitely been covering spoilers throughout. So I think by now,
we mentioned the kiss and everything.
They were hoping not to be spoiled. Yeah.
Okay, so the character, He Who Remains, is a very famous comic book character called Kang the Conqueror, who will appear in the next Ant-Man film, and we knew that because they announced him as Kang. We were all excited for that character. And then when they introduced, sort of talked about Loki being this time travel show, there were theories and stuff about could Kang be in the show? Could we see him? There was a few Easter eggs here and there. There's a lot of umming and ahhing over this. And then I think when I saw that character appear, my mind was blown. I was so excited. The character is so interesting. As a comic book character, he's one of the top tier villains. He's probably going to be. He's better than Thanos.
Doom, Thanos, Kang, Galactus are sort of like your Marvel Rushmore. Everyone has their individual villains, but Kang is a all universe villain, Avengers villain. And what's cool, like I alluded to earlier, like Charlie said, we knew who the actor was. We knew he'd be in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which I love that title. And that's not till 2023. So it was like, oh, okay, cool. But introducing He Who Remains here and having him say, yeah, and there's a version of me there are many versions of me that are awful. And then we show the statue at the end. And it's like, oh, that's him. This guy was trying in his own weird way to prevent the worst possible future. So in terms of wants, it'd be really cool to see maybe Paul Rudd show up in Loki season 2 and tie in to Ant-Man 3. I would love to see Hemsworth show up either to play more Frog Thor, even or a Thor variant. Mobius's jet ski, of course.
That's kind of what I was going to delve into, is the idea of, obviously we're going to see Kang the Conqueror in the future Marvel films and being absolute threat. Probably we might see him in some of the other films before then as well. But what I think is really interesting is we have a really, really incredible actor with Jonathan Majors, who gets to act. His first appearance in the show is a variant of this character that we know in the comics is this evil threat. He acts in such a quirky, fun way, and we know how he's going to be as Kang the Conqueror. And the possibilities with the variants is that you got these incredible actors who get the opportunity to play so many different versions of the same person. Mm-hmm. It must be so much fun for him to do. It's definitely going to be a lot of fun for us to watch. But like Alden said, these shows have the opportunity to have these major actors in the show. I would 100% love to see more versions of characters we already know and love. As different versions of themselves. I don't know if they explain which ship it is. I don't know if there's like a specific spaceship. I know that Neil Armstrong's voice is heard, so maybe it is just like.
Well, Kylie Minogue's heard at one point as well, isn't she?
Kylie Minogue's heard, and I got confirmation about that from the director.
I saw your tweet of that.
What?
I was talking. I just said thank you for making Kylie Minogue canon to the MCU. I'm sure that Kylie Minogue now has a wiki entry on MarvelWiki.com. And I said, I did. I apparently they're big fans of Kylie, and that I said I'm campaigning that they use Better the Devil You Know for season 2, because we need more Kylie Minogue in Disney projects.
Alden, whilst Charlie's searching away, do you want to just just give us a sum up of Loki season 1 for you, and if you don't mind, give it a little score out of 10 as well, maybe a big score out of 10.
I will. So Loki season 1 for me is I don't, and I've talked about this with Charlie, I don't put the shows in my ranking because it's a different medium. It's hard to compare them. Same way I wouldn't compare Mandalorian to Force Awakens, But I think that this is absolutely one of my favorite things that they've made. Kevin Feige continues to shock me. The man must not sleep. This for me, I'll say it right now. This for me is a hard 9.5. Basically a 10, only a 9.5 because it's a cliffhanger, and it broke my heart to see that it was a cliffhanger because I could not believe that my favorite show, because WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier were, you can make the argument of more complete for right now. This one cuts in the middle of a revelation that Mobius doesn't remember Loki. So it was the most cliffhanger possibly of anything that Disney's made in recent memory. Since Thanos snapped, that's basically the biggest cliffhanger since then. So I loved every bit of it. And I am hungry for more. Jamie, there is a rumor, Charlie brought this to my attention, that they've already filmed season 2 of this show. Have you seen this?
I don't think that's
whoa. Don't distract Charlie. He's busy. He's busy researching. We're waiting for that answer, Charlie.
I've researched.
Okay, all right. Okay, you can discuss the rumor. What? Hang on. You're saying they've already shot season 2? That's the rumor.
There was a rumor, but I don't think that's the case because the writer today said that they're working on the story, so I think that got quashed.
Okay.
Sadly.
There was a misunderstanding then.
Yeah, there was I think Clark Gregg, who plays Agent Coulson in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and also the Marvel films, said that there was 12 episodes in development, so maybe he just knew that they were eventually going to do a season 2, but didn't know how many were in season 1. So,
all right then, Charlie, what's your score out of 10?
10 out of 10 for me.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. I gave it 5 stars on Letterboxd. It's just one of these shows where I think long and hard about giving perfect scores, but for me, the show just hit so much right, so much when I went into the show, I imagined we'd see different versions of Loki. Then we got what we got. It surprised me still. I completely imagined that the villain could potentially be another version of Loki, and I was really hoping that wouldn't be the case because it seemed too predictable to me, and everyone was demanding and saying, of course, this is Loki. It can't be Kang the Conqueror. They're not going to do that. And then we get this whole exposition scene where this amazing actor gets to chew dialogue for over 20 minutes. And I'm just watching it, absorbing it. The music is phenomenal. The cast and crew, you can just tell from the script to the set design. Everyone went into this with so much love and heart and wanting to make this the best thing possible. And I think that all comes across just from everything. Tom Hiddleston produced the show. And not only did he produce the show, he starred in it, but he created a whole sort of Loki school before they started filming for the writers, actors, and he gave like a 90-minute presentation about what it means for this character. Like, that's how much he cares about this this character that he's played for so many years. And I think that all comes across in the show. I really enjoyed it. If I were to rank the I agree with that. I think if I were to rank the Marvel shows Disney Plus wise, I would definitely go Loki, WandaVision, and then Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Very good. Well, I will give you my score. First of all, 10 out of 10 for the barking alligator. Never heard an alligator bark like that before.
Which is very impressive.
Yeah, but I'm at the moment at a 7.5 for the series. However, I feel like I will be certainly bumping it up to an 8. I had to binge a big chunk of it to then watch the finale in time for today. So I haven't really had my kind of like, I haven't allowed it all to sort of digest fully yet. So
that's high
I feel
for
like
you,
I'm going to, that is high for me. And I feel like I'm going to bump it up at least to an 8. But for now, it's a 7.5. Meanwhile, it's an 8.5 from Glenn the Geeky Hippie. Agreement from Frogger. These two have been agreeing quite a lot recently, which is strange if we think back to other moments in history. 8.5 also from Frogger. 8.5 from Gaz Nottingham. Hello to Gaz as well. Also, that's not a score, but Adrian Williams. Hello. Kylie was in Doctor Who. Conspiracy confirmed. 9.5 out of 10 from Phil Hawkins.